Standing at just 5'8", Steven Spielberg has become one of the greatest giants in the history of cinema. He was born Stephen Allen Spielberg on December the 18th, 1946, in Cincinnati, Ohio. The eldest child and only son of 4 children, his mother Lee was a concert pianist and his father Arnold was an electrical engineer involved in the development of computers. It was a household shaped by creativity and intellect, though the family moved frequently, first to New Jersey, then Phoenix, Arizona, following his father's career. Growing up Jewish in post-war America wasn't easy and left deep marks on the young Spielberg. His father had lost between 16 and 20 relatives in the Holocaust, and the subject was never far from the dinner table. Spielberg later admitted to feeling conflicted about his identity as a child, sometimes embarrassed by his faith, though never truly ashamed. At school, though, that discomfort turned to something darker. He was bullied, targeted for being Jewish. But even then, in those painful early years, something was quietly taking root. Those conversations about the Holocaust, the weight of them, and the grief carried by his father never truly left him. He couldn't have known it as a boy nursing a bloody nose at school, that one day he would channel all of that inherited pain, all of that sorrow into what many would come to regard as the most important Holocaust movie ever made. That day, however, was still a long way off. First, there was the spark to be ignited. In 1952, his parents took him to see Cecil B. DeMille's The Greatest Show on Earth. He thought they were taking him to see the circus. Instead, he sat in the dark and watched a train crash on screen and was terrified. So gripped was he by what he saw at the age of 12, he recreated the crash using his Lionel toy trains, filmed it with an 8mm camera, and watched it over and over again. That was his first film. From that moment on, there was no stopping him. By 13, he had made a 40-minute war film called Escape to Nowhere, using his classmates as actors. It won first prize in the statewide competition. By the time he was in high school, he had made between 15 and 20 adventure films. At 17, he wrote and directed a 140-minute science fiction film called Firelight, which played for one night at a local theatre and grossed $501 against its budget of $500. So he turned a profit before he'd even finished school, and that was just another indication of what was to come. After taking a tour of Universal Studios as a teenager, Spielberg famously talked his way past the security gate and spent 2 months on the lot as an unofficial apprentice. Hollywood was already calling to him at this point. His professional debut came in 1969 on the show The Night Gallery, a television segment starring the legendary Joan Crawford, scripted by Rod Serling. Crawford was initially sceptical of the young, inexperienced director. By the end, she was singing his praises, recognising something rare and instinctive in him. In the early 1970s, he cut his teeth directing episodes of Marcus Welby, MD, Columbo, and other television dramas, honing his craft, experimenting with technique, and quietly building his reputation. Then came Duel in 1971. A simple premise: a salesman stalked down a highway by a menacing tanker truck. It became one of television's most gripping pieces of suspense. Reviews were outstanding, and Universal expanded it for international theatrical release, and Spielberg was now on his way. His official theatrical debut arrived with The Sugar Land Express in 1974. It was here for the very first time that Spielberg joined forces with a composer named John Williams. It was a partnership that neither man would have known at the time would become one of the most celebrated and enduring collaborations in the entire history of film. The Sugar Land Express earned the Best Screenplay Award at the 1974 Cannes Film Festival, and critics were beginning to circle. One reviewer wrote plainly that a major new director is on the horizon. They had no idea how right they were. In 1975, Spielberg was handed the keys to a project that would change cinema forever. Jaws, a thriller about a great white shark terrorising a seaside town, was a logistical nightmare to shoot. The mechanical shark kept malfunctioning, the schedule overran by 100 days, and the studio even threatened to pull the plug. But Spielberg improvised, finding ways to suggest the shark rather than show it, and the result was something far more terrifying than anyone had planned. John Williams returned to provide the score, and what he delivered was deceptively simple, 2 notes repeating and building. Yet it became one of the most recognisable and iconic pieces of music ever written for the screen. Jaws shattered domestic box office records, won 3 Academy Awards for Best Film Editing, Best Original Score and Best Sound, and made Spielberg a household name overnight. Even Alfred Hitchcock himself praised the young director, saying that he was the first filmmaker that he had encountered who truly thought beyond the visual limitations of the stage. Around this time, a friendship was forming, a friendship that would shape not just Spielberg's career, but the landscape of Hollywood itself. George Lucas, the visionary director who would soon unleash Star Wars upon the world, had become one of Spielberg's closest friends and creative allies. The 2 men shared a deep love of old-fashioned adventure storytelling, of serials and Saturday matinees, of the kind of cinema that made your heart race and your imagination soar. That friendship would soon bear extraordinary fruit. 2 years after Jaws, Close Encounter of the Third Kind confirmed Jaws was no fluke. One of the rare films Spielberg both wrote and directed. It was a film of breathtaking ambition, shot on 65mm film for maximum visual quality, with groundbreaking special effects by Douglas Turnbull and featuring Spielberg's own cinematic hero, French director Francis Tuffant, in front of the camera. It also marked the first of many collaborations with editor Michael Kahn, who would become as indispensable to Spielberg as Williams himself. Close Encounters swept audiences off their feet and won Academy Awards for Best Cinematography and Best Sound Effects and Editing. A critic noted that in New York premiere, the audience stayed in their seats long after the film credits had ended. They simply didn't want to leave. After a misstep with the big budget comedy 1941 in 1979, Spielberg's friendship with George Lucas led directly to one of the most beloved film franchises ever made. It was Lucas who had conceived the story of a daring, whip-cracking archaeologist named Indiana Jones, and it was to Spielberg that he turned to bring it to life. Together, they considered it a love letter for the adventure serials that they had grown up watching as boys. Raiders of the Lost Ark arrived in 1981, starring Harrison Ford as the roguish, irresistible Indiana Jones, filmed across France, Hawaii, Tunisia, and Elstree Studios in England. It was a physically demanding shoot, but Spielberg later said the challenges only sharpened him. John Williams once again delivered a defining score. The now legendary Raiders March has become as iconic as the character himself. The film was a colossal box office success and won 5 Academy Awards for Best Art Direction, Best Film Editing, Best Sound Editing and Best Visual Effects. Roger Ebert described it as an out-of-body experience, a film of glorious imagination that deposits you back in reality, breathless, dizzy and grinning. Then came 1982, and something that transcended cinema entirely. E.T., the extraterrestrial, became more than a film, it became a cultural event. Spielberg deliberately avoided storyboards, shooting in sequence so his young actors' emotions would be completely authentic. John Williams composed what many considered the crowning achievement of his extraordinary career, a score of such warmth and arcing tenderness that it seemed to reach directly into the chest of every person who heard it. The result moved audiences and world leaders to tears. A special screening was held for President Ronald Reagan and First Lady Nancy Reagan, who were visibly emotional by the end. E.T. grossed $700 million worldwide, won 4 Academy Awards for Best Original Score, Best Sound Editing, and Best Visual Effects, and was nominated for Best Picture and Best Director. Critics called it a rapture made audible. One wrote that genuinely entrancing movies are almost as rare as extraterrestrial visitors, and yet here, unmistakably, was one. Throughout the mid to late 1980s, Spielberg continued to push himself. He returned to Indiana Jones territory in 1984 with Temple of Doom, again alongside Lucas and Williams, though the film's darker tone drew some criticism. Then, in 1987, came Empire of the Sun, a deeply personal and ambitious project filmed on location in Shanghai as the first American production to be filmed there since the 1930s, written by the great playwright Tom Stoppard and starring a remarkable young Christian Bale. It was nominated for 6 Academy Awards. Critics were divided at the time, but history has been kinder. One major critic called it the first clear sign that Spielberg, the showman, was also an artist. In 1989, Spielberg brought Indiana Jones back for what felt like a triumphant farewell in The Last Crusade. Lucas returned as producer, Harrison Ford as Jones, and Williams once again provided the musical heartbeat. Spielberg fulfilled a personal dream by casting his childhood hero Sean Connery as Jones's father. The film earned $474 million worldwide and reminded audiences that this team, Spielberg, Lucas, Ford, Williams, was one of the most potent creative forces the film industry had ever seen. In 1991, he returned with Hook, a reimagining of Peter Pan starring Robbie Williams, Dustin Hoffman and Julia Roberts, nominated for 5 Academy Awards and earning over $300 million worldwide. It was an entertaining and commercially successful film, but many felt Spielberg was still searching for something deeper, something that had been waiting inside him for a very long time. And that something arrived in 1993. Schindler's List was unlike anything that Spielberg had made before. Based on the true story of Oskar Schindler, a German businessman who used his factory and his fortune to secure the lives of over 1,000 Jewish people during the Holocaust in Germany. It was a film Spielberg had carried with him subconsciously all of his life. He just hadn't realised this. In 1982, Spielberg was actually approached to make this film originally, but he turned it down because he didn't feel he was the right man for the job. He'd even offered the job to Martin Scorsese, Roman Polanski. Each of these directors turned the film down, before eventually accepting the film himself. Without realising it, this had always been his film. It was a film that he was destined to make, not just because of its history, but because this was something very personal to Spielberg himself. Steven Spielberg's father lost between 16 and 20 members in those very camps, and now the boy who'd always felt uneasy about his Jewish heritage, the boy who'd been bullied at school in corridors and playgrounds for his identity, was about to bear witness on behalf of his own community. He was going to bear witness on behalf of his family, and more importantly, he was going to bear witness of the events that massacred 6 million Jews and bring that story to life in a way that the world would understand and hopefully never forget. Spielberg made the decision to shoot the film in black and white in stark documentary-like style. a radical departure from anything in his previous work. There would be no sweeping adventure, no soaring Williams crescendo to carry the audience safely through. This time Spielberg wanted the audience to feel the full, unordained weight of what had happened. John Williams, his most trusted collaborator, delivered a score of haunting, mournful beauty, anchored by the playing of renowned violinist Isaac Perlman, and I've probably butchered that name, I do apologise for that became as unforgettable as the images it accompanied. The film starred Liam Neeson as Schindler, Ben Kingsley as the Jewish accountant, and again I'm probably going to butcher this name as well, Isaac Stern, and Ralph Fiennes as the chilling, deeply unsettling performance as the sadistic SS officer Armin Goth. It was shot on location in Krakow, Poland, and at the site of the Auschwitz concentration camp itself. Spielberg later said he wept every single day on set. The world responded with a silence and then a roar. Schindler's List won 7 Academy Awards, including Best Picture and, at long last, Best Director for Steven Spielberg. It was his first. Critics and audiences were unanimous. This was not merely a great film, it was a necessary one. Spielberg donated his entire personal profits from the film to Holocaust education and used the experience to fund the Soha Foundation, an organisation dedicated to recording the testimonies of Holocaust survivors for future generations, ensuring the stories of those who lived through the horror would never be forgotten. The boy who had been embarrassed by his heritage, the teenager who had been bullied for his faith, the young man who carried the weight of his father's loss without fully understanding what to do with them. He had finally found the answer. He had made a film, and in doing so he had built a monument. In the same extraordinary year of 1993, Spielberg also released Jurassic Park, a dazzling, groundbreaking spectacle that pioneered the use of computer-generated imagery and once again rewrote the rules of what cinema could achieve. It was a reminder that the same man who could bring audiences to their knees with grief could also fill them with pure, wide-eyed joy. By this point, Steven Spielberg had accumulated one of the most astonishing bodies of work in the history of the medium. He had collaborated with some of the greatest talents of his generation: John Williams, whose music had become inseparable from the Spielberg experience; George Lucas, whose friendship and creative partnership had given the world Indiana Jones; Michael Kahn, his trusted editor across decades, and a remarkable roster of actors who repeatedly returned to work with him. Together they had not merely made films, they had created memories that belonged to millions of people across the world. And yet, the Spielberg story was far from over. Steven Spielberg began his life as a shy, bullied kid filming toy train crashes in his bedroom. He talked his way into a film studio as a teenager and never really left. He has directed some of the highest grossing and most critically acclaimed films in history, received numerous Academy Award nominations, and taken home the Best Director Oscar. He helped invent the modern blockbuster, redefined what popular cinema could be, and then proved, with Schindler's List, that he is capable of something far greater than entertainment. He was capable of bearing witness, of preserving truth, of honouring the dead. From the shores of Almaty Island to the liquidation of the Kawalgo ghetto, from a boy on a bicycle silhouetted against the moon to a man weeping on a Polish street, overwhelmed by what he had made and what it meant, from the 2 trembling notes that told you something was in the water to the haunting cry of a violin raising over the ruins of history. Spielberg has spent his life sitting in the dark, dreaming, and then inventing the entire world to dream alongside him. Some of these dreams have thrilled us, some have made us laugh, some have made us cry, and one, above all others, have made sure we never forget. and that is my my little tribute and brief history of Steven Spielberg. It's only a brief history because the man has achieved so much, and yeah, I mean, I've not even probably mentioned 10% of his movies, but he is an absolute stand. There will never be another Steven Spielberg. If you've enjoyed this little video, then leave a comment in the box below and tell me what you think. I know I've missed a few films off the list, but you've got to draw the line somewhere. And yeah, if you've enjoyed this little brief history on what I consider to be one of the greatest directors and filmmakers of our generation, I don't think there's any doubt that he is the greatest of our generation, then leave a comment in the box below. Thank you so much. Please like, share and subscribe if you haven't done so already, and check out the shorts feed. I'll be back very soon with another video. Tell me in the comments box below who would you like me to do next, and I'll see you then. Take care.